with excuse me, Agon Institute and 21st Century's Models. This is the third Moody installment, 8C, I believe it is. We're off and running. Hello, welcome back to the Agon Institute for Sports Ministry and the 21st Century Models of Sports Ministry. If you're taking it for credit again, get out your PowerPoint notes. You will start this one on the 16th page of the Moody series. We're talking about D.L. Moody, and we're learning a lot of different models from him in the 1800s, of which we can learn from and apply in the 21st century today. I'm Dr. Greg Linville, and along with my colleague Tim Conrad, we're teaching this course on 21st century models. We welcome you in. Remember, the most important thing about this for you is for God to grab hold of your heart and mind and soul in terms of what models do you need to incorporate into your life and your ministry. That's the most important thing. We've talked about Moody, how he got his start with the YMCA, began to learn a lot of things there, began to apply things that he really saw that God was using him in more mega event ways, and he went that revivalism route for a while, but he also then came back to those original roots of the YMCA, realizing that the personal evangelism and that friendship, that outreach in one-on-one or small groups, how that was so important to keeping the evangelical work going. And so today we're going to focus now on the latter part of his life and some of the things that he incorporated, and again providing us with a much basis for developing our own models here in the 21st century. So you look at the 16th slide and you'll see two pictures there. One of black and white that shows the Northfield Seminary and conferences that started, that Moody came back from his England and Scotland revivals and began to really push through. And these both became schools, both Northfield, where he lived, that was his homestead, and then Mount Hermon, which was across the river. And Northfield was for girls, and the girls stayed on his own family homestead. I guess you could call him one of the original women's libists or liberationists, because he very much was at the forefront of starting a school for girls. And this was before even most boys were educated. He was very forward and progressive in his thinking in many of these ways. Very conservative theologically, but very progressive in terms of trying to get the gospel out and get the educational movement going. This became also the home for the summer Northfield conferences that we've mentioned in reference to the student volunteer movement. And when Moody had been so impacted by Canaston Stud, to think about how do we reach college students and athletes. And so he began to host these week-long, and it actually was all summer-long, events for college students coming out of the YMCAs and other movements of the college. It began with just a couple of weeks, these Northfield conferences, where 100 or so college-aged men would come, and they went on for decades and expanded to the whole summer. Thousands of young men attended these, and these were the two mantras, if you will, of the student volunteer mission that grew out of this. The first one was all to go and go to all to go and go to all. And the second one was win the world for Christ in our generation. A model for us, at least a passion for us, needs to become, are we sold out? Are you sold out as a 21st century sports minister? Are you sold out to winning the world in your generation? Anything short of that as a goal, as a vision, I think falls far short. I can't emphasize enough about what happened during that time as a result of those kinds of emphasis that happened at these conferences. I would really, really encourage you to consider your movement and your part in the movement. Is it all to go and go to all? Is it to win people in our generation? How passionate are you about winning the world to Jesus Christ? The next picture on your 17th slide is about Mount Hermon. And just to give you, this is another slide to show you how Moody was the educator, educating women, educating men. And this became part of who he knew he needed to be and how he needed to help other people. That education continued on with the Moody Bible Institute, taking it to the people. You see one of the original buildings there on the right, and you see even a horse-drawn wagon that took all the Bible and all the books out to the people. And he didn't have as much to do with the Moody Bible Institute as he did the Massachusetts schools, but you get a sense here that Moody was very much part and parcel of trying to get this Bible education, and let it never be unknown that it was all of this, the higher education was based on the Bible, on biblical theology. This was what he knew to be truth, and that all the other sciences and all of the other the different subjects, it needed to be rooted in a biblical ethic and a biblical foundation. He would never say that the Bible was a geography textbook or a math textbook, but it needed to nonetheless be influenced by the Bible. Another video there that I would encourage for you to watch to help you understand this. But I want to spend a little time talking to you about what I think was really the genius of Moody. And it goes back, it harkens back to George Williams and the YMCA and what he learned, what Moody learned from the Y. And he kind of came full circle again. He started with the Y, was impacted by the Y, and then he went into that whole area of revivalism, mega event, but he came back to these roots and meeting the perceived need. You see here two pictures that he went into camping ministries to attract men. And another model for you might be in camping. Camping is an amazing way to bring people to Christ. Our friends at Summer's Best 2 Weeks does the best job of any that I'm aware of that helps young people know how to be competitors for Christ, athletes for Christ. Wonderful situation. Again, what Tim Conrad does with Uncharted Waters. These are just wonderful, wonderful times during the summer. Camping, day camps, overnight camps. And you see in this picture, don't you? They camped in three-piece suits, but nonetheless, meeting the perceived need, going where people were, meeting the perceived need of these student conferences. And again, they began with a couple of weeks, but they expanded to whole summers. And you can see all the colleges that are listed there, Columbia, Cornell, Harvard, etc. These incredible YMCA movements on these campuses that led these young men to Christ. And as the YWCA came into existence, also the YW. And so he came back to these YMCA principles. Again, this picture of him reaching these urchin youth. He came back to loving and loving working with youth, especially those college-age men and those manly pursuits. There's the story that is told that with those Northfield colleges and those students that come in, these robust athletes, college athletes, and now he is a middle-aged or older man, and he was always fleet of foot, and he would challenge those young men to a foot race. And he would say, the winner buys the ice cream. And the college athlete would look at this rather rotund older man. He said, you've got to be out of your mind. I mean, that's just, why don't you just go buy it for me right now? And he says, oh, no, no, no. He says, let's make this an even match. And the college student say, of course, an even match. What do you want? Moody would then hand him a box of 50 pounds of weight full of books. And he said, now you have to carry this because I'm carrying this, pointing to his belly. Moody would often win those, by the way, well up into his 50s. He remained very fleet of foot, but he came back to these manly pursuits and that athletics could help us. And he was a forerunner of our sports outreach movement in many ways in that way. Well, now you see in the 22nd slide a picture of his and his wife's burial spot. Anybody that gets up to Northwest Massachusetts, I would and really invite you to stop into Northfield and see this. His final days, absolutely adored by his kids and grandkids. We mentioned this in the last lecture, and we talked about how he took his family with him. He sought to spend quality and quantitative time with them. I once served with a pastor who talked about the quality was so much more than quantity, and once a year he would take his kids on these great trips. And he did end up with a great relationship with his kids, but the kids were always longing for more. It takes both. Your first ministry is to your wife or your husband, and right alongside of it to your children. As we said, he took them to England. And he was there for 2 years, and he took them, and they were always with them. And no matter where he went, he took somebody. When he lived at Northfield, you've got to understand, it's even today, it's kind of out in the country. And he would have to take runs to various places, to different merchants. And he would always take a horse and buggy. He never went alone. He was always taking a child or a grandchild. Well, I would say that he tried to take his grandchildren, but his children restricted their children, Moody's grandchildren, depending upon where this buggy was going and who was in it, because the buggy was often known to be on 2 wheels as it would careen around corners because Moody was always in a hurry. And while the grandkids loved it, the kids were fearful for their kids' lives. But nonetheless, he always took somebody with him. He wrote letters to them. Here's a model for you as a sports minister in the 21st century. Write letters as a model to your kids, to your grandkids. Let me take it one step further. I'm on a mission to write and have notes right now in 3 different Bibles because I have 3 grandsons. And I want to dedicate one of those Bibles to each of my grandsons because I want them to know how important the Bible was to me. And if they see my handwriting in those Bibles, maybe that'll speak to them. Write letters. Moody wrote letters to his kids. He lavished his love on them. He gave them gifts. He gave them physical touches. We're talking about a most important model for you as a sports minister because your ministry will largely be seen through your family. Not by your family, of course by your family, but others will see it through how you interact with your family. All of his children, all of his grandchildren loved the Lord. Even though some of the 3rd generation did die in childhood, those that lived absolutely adored him. Well, Moody, where he's buried, he kept adding land to his homestead, and it overlooked his Connecticut River Valley, the foothills of the Green and White Mountains, the area that he loved. And he just loved to tour that land, getting close to God through nature. Loved driving that buggy fast. But I'm trying to give you a sense that his passion for Jesus at the end of his life was as significant as it was at the beginning. I'm trying to give you a passion to see that he, in fact, was very much beloved by everybody. Well, you see some models now on the screen. As I wrap this up about Moody, and as you develop your own models for 21st century sports outreach, work hard. Moody was no slacker. No matter what he did it with his full intensity. Are you punching the clock? Now, keep in mind, there's 2 clocks for you to punch. One at home and one with your family. Or one at home and one at the ministry, at your work, at your church. But if you're just punching a clock and can hardly wait to get out of your ministry, then you should get out of the ministry. It should be a constant tension that you want to stay at the church, but you choose to go home. And then when you're home, you want to stay there, but you choose to go back to the ministry. Do you understand what I'm saying? You have to have both of those in order to be successful in both. Credibility. You have to develop and maintain your credibility. He was not afraid of poverty. He was not afraid of war. He was not afraid of international travel. He tackled all of these things that he did. He was always truthful. He was always believable. He had personal integrity. How are we doing? You can't develop a model in the 21st century of ministry if you don't have personal integrity and character. Leadership. He identified it. He shared the vision with those that were doing the ministry with them, including sharing with them the potential that he saw in them. In my evangelical friends' heritage, we always talk about that God ordains and mankind records that ordination. Meaning that we go to people and tap them on the shoulder and say, I see this in you. Who do you do that with? Look at the people around you and envision where they can be in ministry. Envision what they can do in ministry. Business people. He identified business people, homemakers, war generals, musicians. They were all people he believed that were called to minister, and he talked to them about them, and he developed them. And thus these schools grew out of this training. He gave them responsibilities through delegation, but he was always there to support them. You can't just say, go do the job and then just leave people. What's not inspected doesn't get done. It's not about looking over somebody's shoulders. It's about looking out for people. And you need to be involved deeply in the leadership. In fact, I'm going to give a challenge to some of you out there. Those of you that are leading, particularly paraministries. I believe that if you believe in the people that you're hiring to work in your ministries, that you personally should financially support them. Yes. Even if you have 1,000 and you can only support them $5 a head, anybody that you hire and you're not willing to financially support, why should anybody else want to financially support them? And what happens when those people actually come to you? What happens when those people that are working for you come to you and know that you're financially helping to support them? You know, Moody was doing all these things to develop leaders. You see, this leads into the next one, and that is to attract finances. Wherever Moody went, he recognized God's plan to finance the ministry through people. And he realized that through their giving, that God was actually going to grow them. Now, it's really hard, I've got to admit, it's really hard for me to raise money from my own salary. But I don't have any problem raising money for somebody else. And I have no problem going to somebody, This person really deserves your financial support. This cause, finances. We've talked about this a lot. We've also talked about this, but I'm going to wrap it up with this. Home. Take care of home. Ministry did not mean separation for Moody from his home, but rather a new place for the family to live for a while, to give them experiences. And marriage and childbearing were the highest priority. All right, so let's ramp this down now. We've had 3 sessions on D.L. Moody. I think there's just so much in him that you can learn from. And we're going to come to some other folks that I'm not as able to say this about, but there's little about Moody that I couldn't fully recommend for you to learn from in the 21st century as you develop your models. But what is God saying to you? That's what you really need to consider, and that's what needs to be part of your notes for the Agon Institute. I'm Dr. Greg Linville for the Agon Sports Ministry Institute. Thanks for joining us.